You thought it was enough. You thought that because you did part of what God asked, you had fulfilled the requirement. You thought that because you took some steps, you could stop short of the full journey. You thought that because you gave something, you could withhold the rest. But heaven does not grade on a curve. Heaven does not accept partial submissions, and the obedience you thought was sufficient has been recorded as rebellion wearing a religious mask. Tonight, God is confronting the half measures that have been blocking the full blessing, and what you do with this confrontation will determine whether you break through or continue breaking down. This is not a coincidence. You did not accidentally find yourself hearing these words at this exact moment. The precision of this encounter is deliberate, divine, designed specifically for your situation. Because God has been waiting for you to finish what you started. He has been patient while you paused in the middle of the assignment. He has been gracious while you negotiated the terms of your surrender. But His patience has a purpose, and that purpose is not to give you permission to stay stuck. It is to give you time to return to complete obedience. That time is running out. The window is narrowing, and what has been extended in mercy will not remain open indefinitely. Let me explain what I mean by partial obedience, because I think you have convinced yourself that what you have done is acceptable. Partial obedience is when God says go all the way and you stop at the halfway point. It is when He says give everything and you give most things. It is when He says cut it off completely and you cut it back partially. It is when He says surrender fully and you surrender selectively. It is doing enough to feel religious while withholding enough to feel in control. It is the appearance of compliance without the substance of submission. And here is what you need to understand. In God's economy, partial obedience is not partial credit, it is complete disobedience. The Bible is devastatingly clear on this. When God told Saul to destroy everything belonging to the Amalekites, Saul kept the best of the sheep and cattle. He had a good reason. He planned to sacrifice them to God. He was going to use the disobedience for worship. But Samuel's response was thunderous. Does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as in obeying the Lord? To obey is better than sacrifice. And because Saul partially obeyed, which means he fully disobeyed, the kingdom was torn from him. Not reduced, torn, complete removal because of incomplete obedience. That story is not ancient history, it is a mirror. And if you look honestly, you will see your own reflection staring back. There is something God told you to do, something specific, something clear, something you could not misunderstand no matter how hard you tried, and you started. You took initial steps, you made early moves, but somewhere along the way you stopped, you paused, you decided that what you had done was enough. You convinced yourself that God would understand. You told yourself that the intention mattered more than the completion, and you have been living in that middle space ever since, neither fully obedient nor fully rebellious, but stuck in a no man's land of partial surrender. The problem with partial obedience is that it gives you just enough righteousness to feel comfortable while leaving you far enough from completion to block the breakthrough. You are close enough to God to feel religious, but not close enough to experience the fullness of His power. You have enough obedience to quiet your conscience, but not enough to open the heavens. You are in the most dangerous position possible. Not cold enough to feel the urgency to change, not hot enough to walk in the fire of His presence, just lukewarm, just partial, just stuck. Let me identify some of the ways partial obedience might be showing up in your life, because I want you to recognize it clearly. Maybe God told you to forgive someone and you said you forgave them, but you still hold the offense in your heart. You have released the debt in your words, but not in your emotions. You have declared forgiveness with your mouth, but rehearsed the wound in your mind. That is partial obedience, and the bitterness you are still carrying is blocking the flow of grace that complete forgiveness would release. Maybe God told you to end the relationship, and you created distance, but you did not create separation. You stopped seeing them as often, but you did not stop texting. You pulled back physically, but you stayed connected emotionally. You obeyed the letter of the instruction while violating its spirit. And that thread of connection you kept is the very thing the enemy is using to pull you back into bondage. Maybe God told you to surrender your finances and you started tithing, but you kept control of the rest. You gave the percentage but withheld the posture. You released 10% while gripping 90% with clenched fists. You obeyed the commandment but missed the heart behind it. Because surrender was never about a number. It was about ownership. And you still believe that what remains after the tithe belongs to you rather than to Him. Maybe God told you to use your gifts for His kingdom, and you serve occasionally, but you have not fully committed. You show up when it is convenient. You contribute when it does not cost too much. You participate when it aligns with your schedule. But the full deployment of everything He placed in you remains locked away, waiting for a season that feels more comfortable, a timing that feels more right, a situation that requires less sacrifice. Maybe God told you to pursue a calling, and you took the first few steps, but then you stopped when it got hard. You started the ministry but did not maintain it. You launched the project but abandoned it when obstacles arose. You said yes initially, but let your yes fade into inaction. And now the assignment sits incomplete, the vision unfulfilled, the purpose unrealized, all because you treated obedience like something you could start and stop at your convenience. These resonates. Which of these describes your situation? Or perhaps there is something else entirely, something specific to your story, something God spoke clearly that you have only partially addressed. Whatever it is, you do not need me to tell you. The Holy Spirit has already been reminding you. He has been pressing on that unfinished obedience for longer than you want to admit. And tonight, the pressure is intensifying because the urgency is increasing. I want you to understand why partial obedience is so offensive to God, because I think you have understated its seriousness. Partial obedience is offensive because it presumes to negotiate with the king. When God gives an instruction, He is not opening a dialogue. He is not asking for your input on the terms. He is not inviting you to modify the assignment based on your preferences. He is issuing a command, and commands from the sovereign Lord of the universe do not come with negotiation clauses. When you partially obey, you are essentially telling God that you know better than He does about how much obedience is required. You are positioning yourself as the editor of His instructions. You are claiming authority over the very God who has all authority. Partial obedience is offensive because it reveals divided loyalty. If you were fully committed to God, you would fully obey God. The fact that you stopped short reveals that something else has a claim on the territory you withheld. Something else is more important to you than complete surrender. Something else is competing for the throne. Partial obedience exposes the idol that complete obedience would have removed, and God, who will not share His glory with another, is grieved by the division. Partial obedience is offensive because it demonstrates distrust. Complete obedience requires trust. It requires believing that God knows what He is doing even when you do not understand. It requires faith that His instructions are for your good even when they feel costly. When you partially obey, you are revealing that your trust has limits. You trust Him up to a point, but beyond that point you trust yourself more. You believe His wisdom covers the easy parts, but the hard parts require your own judgment. And that limited trust is an insult to the one who has never failed, never erred, never made a mistake. Both mode, partial obedience is offensive because it cheapens grace. You are using the grace of God as a safety net for your disobedience. You are presuming that because He is merciful, He will overlook the parts you did not complete. You are treating His kindness as permission rather than as patience leading to repentance. And in doing so, you are trampling on the very blood that purchased your freedom. Let me tell you what partial obedience has cost you, because the invoice is larger than you realize. Partial obedience has cost you the full breakthrough. There was something on the other side of complete obedience. A door that would have opened, a provision that would have been released, a relationship that would have formed, an opportunity that would have emerged. But that breakthrough was tied to the completion of the assignment, not just its commencement. And because you stopped short, the breakthrough remains just out of reach. You can see it, you can sense it, you know it is there. But you cannot access it because the key was hidden in the part of obedience you refused to complete. Partial obedience has cost you spiritual authority. Authority comes through alignment. When you are fully submitted to God, you carry the weight of His backing. When you speak, heaven responds. When you pray, things shift. When you take ground, it stays taken. But partial obedience creates gaps in your alignment. It leaves openings where the enemy can push back. It weakens your standing in the spiritual realm. And the authority that should have been yours has been compromised by the obedience you withheld. Partial obedience has cost you peace. You have been restless, unsettled, unable to find the equilibrium you are looking for. And you have blamed it on circumstances, on relationships, on the season of life you are in. But the real source of the restlessness is the incomplete assignment. Your spirit knows that something is unfinished. Your soul carries the weight of the undone. And no amount of distraction, comfort, or achievement can substitute for the peace that comes from complete surrender. Partial obedience has cost you time. Every day that the assignment sits incomplete is a day that could have been spent walking in the fullness of what complete obedience would have released. You have been spinning your wheels, making motion without progress, busy but not fruitful. And the days have become weeks, the weeks have become months, the months have become years. Time you cannot recover. Time that could have been invested in purpose. Time that was consumed by the stagnation of partial surrender. Partial obedience has cost you the deeper relationship with God. He wants all of you, not most of you, all. And as long as you are holding something back, there is a dimension of intimacy that remains inaccessible. He will not force his way into the rooms you have locked. He will not barge past the boundaries you have set. He waits, he invites, he woos, but he will not take by force what must be given by choice. And the intimacy you have been craving requires the surrender you have been avoiding. Now I want to shift and speak to why you stopped. Because understanding the root helps you address the fruit. Some of you stopped because of fear. The next step of obedience felt too risky. The cost seemed too high. The potential for failure felt too real. And fear whispered that you had done enough, that God would understand, that pushing further was unnecessary. But fear is not your counselor. Fear is your captor. And the obedience that fear is blocking is the very obedience that would set you free from fear's control. Some of you stopped because of comfort. Complete obedience would have required sacrifice. It would have disrupted your routines. It would have demanded changes you did not want to make. And comfort convinced you that you could have the blessing without the cost, that you could access the promise without fully engaging the process. But comfort is a liar, and the ease you are protecting is the very thing preventing the elevation you are seeking. Some of you stopped because of pride. You wanted to maintain control. You wanted to keep your hand on the steering wheel. You wanted to obey on your terms, at your pace, in your way. And complete surrender felt like weakness. It felt like giving up something you had earned the right to keep. But pride is not protecting your dignity. It is destroying your destiny. And the control you are clinging to is a far smaller thing than the kingdom you could inherit through release. Some of you stopped because of unbelief. Deep down, you were not sure God would come through. You were not confident that complete obedience would lead to complete blessing. You hedged your bets. You kept a backup plan. You obeyed enough to appear faithful, while withholding enough to protect yourself if God failed. But God does not fail. He cannot fail. And your unbelief has been the primary obstacle to experiencing His faithfulness. Some of you stopped because of weariness. The journey felt too long. The process felt too demanding. The waiting felt too exhausting. And somewhere along the way you ran out of stamina. You did not consciously decide to stop. You just slowly lost momentum until one day you realized you had been standing still for longer than you could remember. Whatever the reason, the result is the same. Incomplete obedience, unfinished assignment, partial surrender. And tonight, God is calling you back to the task. He is asking you to pick up where you left off. He is inviting you to complete what you started. Let me tell you what happens when partial obedience becomes complete obedience, because I need you to see what you are fighting for. When you complete the obedience, the breakthrough manifests. The door that was stuck begins to swing open. The provision that was delayed begins to flow. The relationship that was blocked begins to form. The opportunity that was hidden begins to reveal itself. Because the completion was the trigger, the finishing was the key, What you have been waiting for has been waiting for you to finish. When you complete the obedience, the authority returns. You can feel the difference immediately. Prayers that felt weak begin to carry weight. Words that fell flat begin to create impact. The enemy that had been advancing begins to retreat. Because you closed the gap, you sealed the breach, you removed the opening that was allowing compromise. When you complete the obedience, the peace floods back. The restlessness subsides. The anxiety diminishes. The unsettled feeling gives way to a settledness that circumstances cannot shake. Because you are in alignment again. You are walking in sync with the will of God. And there is a peace in that alignment that nothing else can produce. When you complete the obedience, the intimacy deepens. You get access to rooms you could not enter before. You experience dimensions of His presence that were previously blocked. You hear His voice with clarity that had been missing. Because you removed the barrier, you unlocked the door, you gave Him permission to come into the space you had been protecting. When you complete the obedience, the momentum builds. What felt like pushing a boulder uphill becomes riding a wave of grace. Progress that seemed impossible becomes inevitable. Ground that took months to gain now takes days, because momentum is the reward of consistency, and consistency requires completion. You cannot build momentum while leaving assignments unfinished. This is what is waiting for you. This is what is available on the other side of complete obedience. Not more striving, not more effort, just the fruit of finishing what God told you to start. But I need to warn you about something. The enemy does not want you to complete the obedience. He knows what is on the other side. He knows the breakthrough that awaits. He knows the authority that will return. And he will do everything in his power to keep you stuck in the partial. He will tell you that you have already done enough. He will minimize the importance of what remains. He will magnify the cost of completion. He will remind you of every reason you stopped in the first place. He will make the unfinished portion feel larger than it is. He will exhaust you with thoughts of how hard it will be. Do not listen. Recognize his voice for what it is. Deception designed to keep you in bondage, and push through anyway. The resistance is actually a sign that you are on the right track. The enemy does not fight against what does not threaten him, and your complete obedience threatens his entire operation in your life. Let me also address the grace question, because I know some of you are wrestling with it. You might be thinking that grace covers your partial obedience. You might be telling yourself that because you are saved by grace through faith, the specifics of obedience are not that important. You might be using the freedom of the gospel as a justification for the incompleteness of your surrender. Let me be clear. Grace is glorious. Grace is essential. Grace is the only reason any of us can stand. But grace was never meant to be an excuse for disobedience. Grace empowers obedience. It does not exempt you from it. The same grace that saved you is the grace that enables you to obey. And when you use grace as a cover for partial surrender, you misunderstand the very nature of what grace is for. Paul addressed this directly. Shall we go on sinning so that grace may increase? By no means. We are those who have died to sin. How can we live in it any longer? The logic of the gospel is not that grace permits disobedience. The logic is that grace transforms us so that we desire obedience. And if you are using grace to justify your partial surrender, something has gone wrong in your understanding of what grace actually does. Grace does not lower the standard. It raises your capacity to meet it. Grace does not excuse incomplete obedience. It gives you the power to complete it. Grace does not give you permission to stop short. It gives you the strength to go all the way. So stop hiding behind grace as if it justifies your partiality, and start accessing grace as the power source for your completion. Now let me speak practically about what completing the obedience might look like. First, you need to identify specifically what remains undone, not in general terms but in precise detail. What exactly did God ask you to do? What exactly have you done? What exactly remains? Be specific. Write it down if necessary. Because vague assignments lead to vague execution. Clarity leads to completion. That we books to do what the shrine goes sometimes. We say a decipher war. Need into which can be retaining against comfort, pride, unbelief, weariness, name it, call it out. Because you cannot overcome what you will not confront. And the obstacle that remains unnamed is the obstacle that remains powerful. Third, you need to make a decision, not a preference, not an intention, a decision. A settled, non-negotiable commitment that says this will be completed regardless of how it feels, regardless of what it costs, regardless of what obstacles arise. Decisions have a power that intentions lack. Decisions mobilize resources that preferences cannot access. Make the decision. Fourth, you need to take the next step immediately. Not tomorrow, not next week. Now, tonight, before the conviction fades, before the resistance increases, before the enemy has time to regroup. What is the very next action required to move the assignment forward? Take it now, while the fire is burning, while the spirit is moving, while the will is engaged. Fifth, you need to establish accountability. Tell someone what you are committing to complete. Give them permission to follow up. Let them ask the hard questions. Because partial obedience often continues because no one is watching. When someone else is aware, when someone else is expecting progress, the dynamics shift. Accountability creates the external pressure that supports the internal decision. I want to address something that might be holding you back. Some of you feel like too much time has passed. You feel like the window has already closed. You feel like because you delayed for so long, completing it now would not matter. The opportunity is gone. The season has shifted. It is too late. Hear me, it is not too late. As long as you have breath, it is not too late. The God who gave the original instruction is the God who can restore the opportunity. He is the God of redemption. He specializes in resurrecting dead things. He delights in restoring wasted years. And the very fact that He is confronting you now, tonight, through this message, is proof that the assignment is still active. The window is still open. The opportunity is still available. Do not let the enemy use the past to steal the present. Yes, you delayed. Yes, time passed. Yes, things could have been different if you had completed it earlier. But none of that changes what is possible now. Now is all you have. Now is all you can control. And now is sufficient to complete what was left undone. The prophet Joel spoke of God restoring the years the locust had eaten. That restoration is available to you. The time that was lost to partial obedience can be redeemed through complete obedience. What should have taken years can be compressed into months. What should have taken months can be compressed into weeks. God is the Lord of time. And when you align with His purposes, He accelerates the process in ways that defy natural explanation. I want to tell you a principle that might shift your perspective. The delay you have experienced has not just been wasted time. It has been preparation time. God has been developing things in you during the waiting that will be essential for the completion. Character has been forming, endurance has been building, dependence has been deepening, and now that you are ready to complete the assignment, you are more equipped to do it than you were when you first started. The you who began is not the same you who will finish. You are stronger now, wiser now, more aware of your need for God now. And the completion you are about to walk in will be marked by a maturity that was not present in the commencement. So do not despise the delay, redeem it. Use what you have learned in the waiting to strengthen your execution of the finishing. Let the lessons of the pause become the power of the push. Now I want to pray for you. And this prayer is going to be specific to the incomplete obedience that has been confronted tonight. I want you to actively participate. Not just listen, engage. Let this be a moment of covenant between you and God, a moment where you commit to completion, a moment where partial becomes whole. Father, I bring before you this one who has heard the conviction tonight. You know the assignment that was given. You know how far they went. You know where they stopped. You know every reason behind the pause, and you also know the breakthrough that is waiting on the other side of completion. Lord, I ask that you would stir up a holy dissatisfaction with partiality. Let them become uncomfortable with incomplete obedience. Let the unfinished assignment burn in their spirit until they cannot rest without addressing it. Give them clarity about exactly what remains to be done. Remove the confusion, dissolve the ambiguity. Let the next step be obvious and the path forward be clear. Give them courage to face whatever obstacles have been blocking them. If it is fear, let your perfect love cast it out. If it is comfort, let your call to more disrupt their contentment. If it is pride, break it with your gentle conviction. If it is unbelief, replace it with a fresh revelation of your faithfulness. If it is weariness, renew their strength like eagles. Give them the grace to complete what they started, not in their own power but in yours. Let the same Spirit who began the good work in them be the one who carries it to completion. Let them move forward not by might, not by power, but by your Spirit. And Lord, I ask that you would release the breakthrough that has been waiting. As they complete the obedience, open the door, release the provision, manifest the promise. Let them experience the fullness that partial obedience was blocking. I speak completion over their life. I speak finishing grace over their assignment. I speak breakthrough over their circumstances. Let tonight be the night they move from partial to complete. Let tonight be the night everything changes. Such was stayed with statues, yoke. Amy, that prayer is not just words, it is a covenant. And now the responsibility shifts to you. Will you honor it? Will you act on it? Will you complete what God started in you? The assignment is waiting. The breakthrough is waiting. Heaven is waiting. The only question is whether you will move. If God has spoken to you tonight about incomplete obedience, if you are ready to commit to completing what you started, type the words, "I will finish what God started," as your declaration. Let it be a public commitment. Let it be a stake in the ground. Let it be the first step toward completion. Do not carry partial obedience into another season. Do not let another month pass with the assignment undone. Do not give the enemy any more ground by leaving gaps in your surrender. Complete it, finish it. Watch what God does when you finally say yes with your whole life, not just part of it. Stay focused, stay committed, and do not stop until it is done. The best is waiting on the other side of your completion.